The other day, someone was like, oh, I could tell you shot that in the morning because you were drinking coffee in the video. And I'm like, I think you seriously underestimate my coffee consumption. All right, you guys, we're doing side figures today. Okay, this video is all about male side figures. If you are looking for the female side figure video, that has already been posted. It is somewhere on my channel, probably in the female fashion figure playlist. So try that. Now, as usual, I'm going to follow my 4-step croquis building process because it applies to male, female, adult, child croquis, front, back, side. Okay. Now, this video is going to move a little bit quickly because I'm going to go over all the steps, including elongation. If at any point in time you are confused about a step, I already have the male fashion figure, 4-step process in agonizing detail. I have all those videos already. So if you need more details on a specific step, I suggest you go watch the more in-depth videos. Yeah, they're about front view figures, but a lot of the same things apply. Okay? You don't need to watch the female side view figure video because all that information that applies to male figures will be in this video. All right, let's review the 4 steps of croquis building. Number 1, tracing the gesture, okay, where we figure out the pose, we figure out the proportions. Step 2, building the body. Step 3, adding anatomy. Step 4, photoshopping with pencil or perfecting with pencil. Let's go over the supplies we're gonna need today. First up, you're gonna need swipe, aka scrap, aka visual reference. Side view figures, large unpixelated photographs. Clean lighting so you can see the body. In poses that, like when you pick a pose, number 1, is it going to show off the design? Okay. Like this is a really great pose for a lot of the side, front, transition sort of designs. And this is a great pose for, how everything really does look on the side and also any cool sort of sleeve designs. Okay. So think about the design that you're going to use it for. Think about your own skill level. Okay? You don't want anything too twisty-turny if you're a beginner. Start with something simple and practice and grow your skill set. Okay? And of course, you want figures that aren't wearing much in the way of clothes so you can really see the body, the pose, and the anatomy. Here is the anatomy book that I like, The Human Figure, An Anatomy for Artists by David K. Rubins. I got this in college. So, it was in print about 350 years ago, and I bought it at an actual brick and mortar store. But currently it's available on Amazon if you're looking for it. And no, Amazon did not pay me, and this guy didn't pay me. Nobody is paying me for, my recommendations. And I like this book because it's simple. It's not like one of those really in-depth medical texts where they pull apart every ligament and show you what each tendon is for. This is just like, hey, here are the leg shapes because you're going to draw them like this. And here are the hand shapes that you're going to draw. You're going to need a 18-inch clear graph ruler. You're going to need some tracing paper. It can be on a roll. It can be on a pad. I don't care. Let's talk about pencils. When I am building croquis, I always use mechanical pencils so that I can always have a nice fine point. And when I'm working on croquis on my own, I will start off with a 0.3 size HB lead, something skinny and something really light. During filming, I always use a darker pencil for you guys so that the camera can really pick it up very clearly. And so this is a 0.5B. And then, of course, skinny erasers. I like to have a couple of colored pencils around for different steps and corrections. I got these mechanical color pencils at the recommendation of a subscriber. Thanks again. This is the Pilot Color Eno 0.7, and they're awesome. I'm about to buy another refill set of the lead artist tape or something similarly non-sticky. You guys know that if the tape is too sticky, I'll just put lint on it to make it less sticky. Let's start with this one because this one is the more straightforward pose. When you have your swipe, you're going to mark it up in a couple of different ways. Number one, you need your plumb line, okay? Plumb lines, front, back, or side. It starts at the center base of the neck and then goes through your weight distribution in your feet, okay? And so here, normally in the front view, you would mark it right here. You like my new mic? At your suprasternal notch, but this is a side view, so we're going to start at the center of his neck. And then, you know, he's balancing a little bit on these toes, but mainly his weight is on this ankle, and so this is going to be his plumb line. Now, if you can see the front or side view on a side pose, I will mark it, the center front, side seam, you know, if I can see a little bit of the back. This one, you can see a little bit of his back. Where's his spine? There's his butt. Like, he's twisting just a little bit. There's his spine, and there's his butt. Transfer your plumb line, and now we trace the gesture. Make sure you always trace the entire head and not just the face, angle of his neck, and then we have his arm here. There's his deltoid. Oh, he's kind of ripped. And there is his elbow. There's his wrist. And then here's his rib cage. There's his kind of the bottom of his pecs. When I do side view figures, I don't usually do a pelvic box. When I have kind of like slightly 3/4 side view figures like this, I will do a pelvic box. You know, there's the center front, perpendicular, perpendicular. That's one side. You got to make this square the same size as this square. This is the front plane of her pelvis. And then here is the side. This corner that sticks out is going to be the widest part of her butt. And then the center of the side plane is where her side seam is, right? So her side seam sits like that, right? So when I have something more 3/4, I will do a pelvic box, but with something like this where you can barely see the center back, I won't. What I will do is I will mark the center back, and I will mark the crotch. Of course, the hand. Yes, I have a hands video in the queue somewhere. We're going to mark the entire width of the knee. Mark the center. And the foot, of course. And then this is in the back, but if you can't see the whole thing, try to just kind of figure out something that's similar in size as the one in the front. This one's coming down like that. There's the ankle, and I'm going to trace the bottom of his foot. That's the bottom of his foot. That's the top of his foot. And then from here, you fold the paper over, move on to step 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to show you all those steps, but on the elongated figure because it's the more difficult demo, and you'll be able to figure out how to do it for the short one based off of the other demo. So now I'm going to do an elongated step 1. We have the plumb line. We've marked the center back. We need to measure his head. Men's elongated figures, I do about a 9.5 head figure. Ankles to 9 and then half a head for a foot in a not high-heeled shoe. So let's measure his head. Don't measure it like this. Measure along his center front. It's like 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/16. That's annoying. Why do you have such a big head? I always put the number line on the back so that whatever erasing and corrections I do, I don't lose my number line. Okay, so the 1 is going to be right at the base of his chin, and we're going to line up those plumb lines. Always make sure that your plumb lines are matched up perfectly. You don't want to start distorting the figure and moving things around. Okay, we are simply elongating. If you want, you can keep the hairstyle in there. Waist is at 3, elbows at 3, armpits are around 2, so adjust to about there. And you're like, Zoe, the head is at a weird angle. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Don't worry about it. There's his clavicle. There's his rib cage. Men, their crotches hit at 4.5, not half an inch, but half the head space. We're marking that. Keep your plumb lines matched up. Mark your center back. Mark the rest of your bum. And there's his wrist. And yeah, I would make his hand a little bit bigger. Make him, proportionate and everything. Whenever you can't see something, just mark it directly on your visual reference. Now, whenever you mark the knees, you're going to mark the weight leg first. And this 6 mark is going to sit at the top of his knee. Again, keep your plumb lines matched up. There's the center of his thigh. And then once you've done that, you can mark your other knee. At this point, where you set the ankle is going to define your vertical proportions for your male figure. So for costume design, I will keep the ankles at 8. I will have elongated him about half a head. And, 8.5 head figures work well for costume design because actors do tend to be shorter than models. This proportion also works well for younger teen, tween kind of figures. And if you want, a little bit longer, maybe your ankles can be at 8.5, and that's nicer for, more youthful look, more sporty look, more casual look, denim looks. If you are going for your classic elongated male figure, ankles are at 9. I've seen people do like super tailored suiting and tuxedos where, the ankle's firmly at 9.5 and the foot is at 10. That is very exaggerated, but typically both male and female evening wear looks tend to be the most exaggerated fashion figures. Like sometimes for evening wear, I'll even do an 11 head figure for women. So I'm going to do kind of my classic standard, which is the 9.5. Keep my plumb lines matched up and mark my ankle at 9. And then, of course, I'm going to make the foot a little bit bigger than this guy. Since we are making him so much taller, got to keep everything in proportion, right? And then always mark the weight ankle first. And then we're going to mark this other one afterwards. And again, we're going to mark the bottom of his foot. And everything is going to be a little bit bigger. And there's your step one for this figure. I'm going to take a little piece of tracing paper and trace his head and his neck. Whenever you elongate a neck that is at an angle, you want to adjust the position of the head, okay? If you keep the head position the same, you notice how the base of the neck doesn't line up? If you line up the base of the neck and you keep the position of the head the same, then everything looks super stiff and straight up and down and not the original pose. His neck and head angle is nice and relaxed, and I want to keep that. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to keep the angle of the neck the same, and you're going to change the position of the head slightly. You're moving the head forward because, you know, this angle is just continuing, and so everything is moving forward. You see that? This point, your suprasternal notch, is your pivot point. You got to make sure that the chin still stays at the 1 mark. And now you have the correct position for his head. Step 2 is pretty easy, but don't do anything stupid like rush through it and make dumb mistakes and stuff. Yeah. I can see the comments now. Dear Zoe, do not quit your day job. Stop singing immediately. Stop trying to make up songs immediately. Just stick to teaching. Step 2. This book has a complete side view of the musculature. If you have any problems with any section, you know, you can go in and look at more in-depth photos of the rib cage and the latissimus dorsi and the scapulas and biceps and all that good stuff, right? But I'm going to keep this here as my reference. There's the knob of his spine. I'm going to give him an Adam's apple, a little bulge there. There's his sternocleidomastoideus, aka his Roger. There's his clavicle, which ends right over his deltoid. And there's his armpit. His deltoid comes in this kind of shape. Now, as you can see, you don't see a line here. You know, he's not a Ken doll where you can see where the arm is stuck into the socket. But sometimes I will draw that on a croquis so that later I know where to place my armhole. Okay. Remember, these figures are not for how perfectly human-like they can be, but they're to help you draw your designs later. So I will put that arm there so later, you know, if I'm designing something with a drop sleeve, I know that's going to be my dropped armhole. This is going to be my tailored armhole. That's going to be my raglan sleeve armhole, whatever, right? I'm going to give him a bulkier shoulder blade. And there's his pec right there. And your oblique cut sits about 1/3 to 1/2 down the forearm. See, on him it's about 1/2. On him it's about 1/3. Here is the 1/3 here, so that's going to be where his oblique cut is. A few ripples for his 6-pack, right? Bulge of his bicep. bulge of his brachioradialis before it tucks into a slim wrist. There is the sharp corner of his elbow. Again, bulging out before we tuck in for his wrist. There's a tiny bit of his center back, remember that? And then we can see his butt here. We have the front curve of his quad, and then his ham curves too. We have gluteus maximus, dip, and then hamstring. Right? So gluteus maximus, dip, and then curving out for the hamstring, and there's the back of his knee. And then again, we have curving out for the front of his quad, and then the sharp kind of corners for his kneecap. Now notice this kind of back angle for the leg on a man who's standing straight up and down, okay? So we're going to add to the back for his gastrocnemius and push back for the shin while still adding a slight curve. So the peak, the widest part of his calf is about 1/3 of the way down. So that's going to be where he's widest. And then I'm going to taper in a slight bit before we come back out for his foot. And then again, there's his shin. Notice how far back away from that initial blue line I am, but still curving outward a little bit, and then coming back out for a solid ankle, and then the rest of his foot. Again, here we're going to, that's 1/3 of the way down, so that's going to be the widest part. And then again, I'm going to pull back from this blue line, taper in, and then there's his ankle, the bottom of his foot, like so. Those of you who are wondering really what step 2 is for, this is one of the most important things about step 2, is like figuring out this kind of like where to place this in juxtaposition to this, in relation to this, to get the figure right. And then step 4. Step 4, the first thing you want to do is make your corrections. The second thing you want to do is change the body to suit your muse and or customer. So you can make him super ripped and buff and, you know, add bigger deltoids, biceps, what have you. You know, maybe your menswear line is dedicated to guys who gain more weight around their hips and thighs. There are pear-shaped men out there. You know, Stephen Colbert is always making self-deprecating comments about how he's pear-shaped. You know, those guys need clothes too. So maybe that's your customer. And so you're going to add more musculature and fat to his thighs, whatever. I always do corrections with the body flipped because it's like looking at a fresh figure, and it really helps, you know, jar your eye into looking at it and finding mistakes more quickly. I don't really see any mistakes. I think that the neck is a little too long and I just want to drop the whole head down. I would do that. I think that makes it a little bit more natural looking. I think that his shoulder blade needs to come out and I want to give him a little bit more lats. All right, let's do that pear-shaped figure. Okay, let's give him a little bit more butt. And let's give him a bit more thigh. And whatever you do to one leg, you got to do to the other. I'm going to flatten his pec and his upper body a little bit, but I like the size and shape of his calves as is. I'm going to leave it like that. All right. I like that. It's kind of sexy with a little extra thigh and booty. All right, and now I'm going to show you guys the 4 steps with this kind of side view figure. And here I am just freehanding a side view because I love drawing side views. If you've caught me on Instagram, you'll have noticed that left to my own devices, not following a client's brief or anything, I tend to enjoy drawing side view figures quite a bit. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. Again, if you have any questions and want me to elaborate on any of the steps, go watch the other more in-depth videos first. I'm going to drop a link to the entire male fashion figure drawing playlist in the info box. Any other questions, check the info box. If your answer is not there, scroll through the comments and see if I've already answered your question. You know, I only check my comments once a day, so you might be actually saving yourself time by checking that first. Otherwise, you know, share, subscribe, like, all those beautiful things. And yeah, feel free to always leave me subscriber requests for a future lesson. Just keep in mind that the queue is currently a year long. I know, it's crazy. I keep checking the queue to make sure I got that right. No, that's right. It's a year out. All right, guys, go practice, and I will see you next time.